that intuition can be trained, and you can learn how to do this, and you can learn how to improve it. And in one case study alone, I changed a group of people who were very, very highly analytic. We had an 87% shift in their cognitive style to a more intuitive entrepreneurial style, just by delivery of the, master classes, which was the training program, 1-day training programs, and coaching. So that was a great shift.
I love a good sort of personality test. Is that something that you can do? Can you do an am I an intuitive person kind of test? Is there some sort of, you can?
Yes, of course. Yes, there's a quick one on my website if you want to go to that. There's
is that right?
5 questions there. So, but yeah, there are certain characteristics of more intuitive people. And for example, when you're working with different groups of people, I like to pair them up because they learn from each other, obviously. So in one particular group, I had a female who was very, very intuitive, and she was really tapped into it. But she was quite senior in the organization, and she used to get enormously frustrated working with the analysts or the people that were more analytic because they didn't see the big picture. You see, and you've often read probably a lot, Rosie, about Steve Jobs, and he used to get enormously frustrated with people. He was highly, highly intuitive. He got it. He knew where he wanted to go, what it was going to look like, and he demanded, a very high level of performance from people. But yet, he couldn't always articulate that very well. So that communication's a big key here for people, because entrepreneurs know exactly it, but they don't always go down the steps needed to manage and work well with other people. So that's one of the things that, blending them together and getting them to understand each other more and teaching communication strategies helps that as well as their awareness that they are more intuitive or not. So
I often doubt my intuition because I'm scared or not sure. Maybe I don't trust it.
Yeah, that's true, because trust, stress, fear, all those things get in the way of it. So you've got to unpack the barriers. Groupthink is another one that gets in the way of it. As you said earlier about, oh, maybe I'm not prepared to actually stand up and say, oh, well, my gut feeling tells me this. So it's about really that self-awareness, self-knowledge, and getting in touch with who you really, really are, and knowing how you work as a more intuitive person. So being able to unpack that. So that's the important point. And that's what takes, time when I work with people, a little bit of time to get that and unpack it. You've got to look at it. Some people will say to me, oh, I use it more personally than in business. Like I had a woman who, she was the CEO for an organization, I won't say which one, and she said to me, she's a very solid businesswoman, but she said, I knew the minute I walked down the aisle to marry that man, it was all wrong. But she said, it took me 2 years to get out of it.
Wow.
So,
yeah, sometimes you're on such a roll with something you're just intuitively unsure of, and it's very hard to unpack it and get out of it, but it happens to all of us, I guess.
And it's inconvenient, okay? It's very inconvenient sometimes. It will take you in a direction you don't necessarily want to go to, but in retrospect, you'll see why.
Do you think that intuition and information about intuition will ever be incorporated into business courses?
Yes, it is already overseas, just not here. Okay, so in Columbia University in New York, there's a program called Strategic Intuition. It's written by Professor William Duggan. That's a great book. There's a massive stuff happening in Europe, particularly, because I keep in touch with this entire network around the world through, and they're academics, they're academics and researchers. It's valued, it's acknowledged. Harvard write about it. All sorts of people have written about the role of intuition and gut feeling and decision making. There's a huge body of research, which is what started me on this whole process, Rosie. When I started to get into it, when I did my research, I found that there was an enormous amount of academic work, but nothing really in the public arena that wasn't more related to, and you and I touched on this earlier, more psychic ability, more woo-woo, and there is a huge body of science there around decision-making science. And they're more popularly things like Malcolm Gladwell and Blink, and he calls it rapid cognition. The psychologists talk about, thinking fast and slow, or Kahneman rather, but that's all about the head. And it's not just about the head, it's about the entire body, the entire being. It's your own intelligence. It's a gift. Albert Einstein said the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift.
Do people use intuition in just generally and mostly in business a lot? Is that something that people go with when they're making business decisions?
Well, it's a very interesting question, because at first people wouldn't necessarily admit it, but the number of CEOs and founders that I've talked to that have said, I just knew when I was hiring that person, or, being appointed to that board, I knew that I had to look more deeply, because my gut feeling, and men often refer to gut feeling more than women, told me about that. So often it's a spark for further investigation. So yes, they do.